This is an interview on the 11th of February 2006 with Colin George Bryan, VX144785, V37395, Private, 39th Battalion, D Company, 16th Platoon. Colin, you joined the Army in August 1941. You were called up with the 22nd Battalion, South Gippsland Battalion. Can you please tell us a bit about that?
Yes, I can. In those days, there wasn't much travelling done, and I'd never been far away from home really, and this was quite an experience. And I went up there, and I was supposed to be in for 3 months training. But then, of course, later on, when the Japanese came into the war, we were in for the duration.
And you were based at Trail for a few months?
Yes.
With the 22nd Battalion?
22nd, yeah.
And then word came through about a battalion being raised for New Guinea, the 39th.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, well, they called for volunteers to go to New Guinea. They were forming a new battalion, and I thought it sounded a nice place to go, sort of a tropical paradise to me. I'd never been out of Victoria. So I signed up to go with the 39th.
So you joined the 39th and you went to Darley?
Yeah.
And you were originally with D Company?
D Company, yeah.
Do you remember much about the training at Darley?
Yeah, we had a fair bit of training. I remember we did unarmed combat, which was one of the things I've never done before. And of course we did a few marches and that sort of thing. It was a nice place to be there, nice camp. And it was a bit nearer home too than what Seymour was.
And because it was a new battalion, what was the feel, the morale amongst the chaps in your D Company? Was it good?
Oh, it was good, yeah. I think so. Yeah, well, everybody was quite happy and, keen to get going, really, I suppose.
Prior to leaving up to Sydney to embark on the Aquitania, there was a march in Melbourne. Were you involved in the march with the 39th Battalion?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Oh, terrific. Yeah, a lot of people waving and that sort of thing. It was really great. Yeah.
So I think on Boxing Day, the 39th, this is in 1941, left by train to go to Sydney. So can you tell us a bit about your trip to Sydney and then the arrival in Sydney to on board the Aquitania?
Yes. Well, we headed off, of course, on the train, and there was seating, but then when nightfall came, you had to find a spot to sleep or lay down. Some got up in the luggage racks and some slept on the floor, a couple to a seat. And we arrived in Sydney, and I just forget what happened actually in Sydney. We went down to the wharf anyway, or down to where the Aquitania was, the ship, and got on board. And that was an experience. The luxury liner that, one English liner it was. Yeah, it was good.
And you were basically posted downstairs?
Oh, yes. Down in the hold, you'd call it, I suppose. Yeah.
And tell us a bit about the trip to New Guinea. It would have been fairly uneventful, except for, was there a submarine alert during the trip?
Yeah, one day we were we were sitting down to lunch, and this alarm went, and we looked out, and the destroyer that was escorting us was laying a smoke screen around us. There had been a submarine alert, and we also had another 2 destroyers, one each side of us, and they came in close too. And but nothing eventuated, thank goodness, and we kept on our way.
And the Aquitania finally arrived in Port Moresby Harbour. How did you feel when you got to New Guinea, not really being out of Victoria even?
Yeah, it was quite an experience. Yeah, and it's funny, but the first thing I noticed, there were so many black people there. Of course, they were the natives, who wasn't used to seeing black people about. But anyway, we got off onto smaller boats and went ashore. Yeah, it was good.
And then you had the march up to the 7 Mile Drive, which was going to be your home for the next few months.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, well, we were told that, we thought we would have been taken out in transports, but they didn't have any spare trucks at that time, so we decided to walk out. And they called it a march. It was more of a walk, really. We just took our own time and got out, and we were camped on the side of a hill just above the 7 Mile airstrip.
And what were your main duties at the 7 Mile Drome during this time?
Well, we did some training, and also we did a fair bit of guard work. We guarded the drome and the roads around that and that sort of thing, and went on a few marches to get ourselves acclimatised.
And then the bombing started. Tell us a bit about the bombing and the zeros and things like that.
Yeah. Well, that was a bit scary because we'd never been bombed before, but we soon found out what it was like. But they had it on their own. We had no fighters to protect us. We had one anti-aircraft gun, or one regiment of them. You know, how many? I'm not sure how many guns. But the Japanese discovered they can come in above the anti-aircraft range, so that didn't deter them. They'd always come in a V formation, but they didn't actually try bomb us. They were trying to bomb the airstrip and stop it being used, and they never ever really stopped them.
Colin, there were a lot of bombing raids on the 7 Mile drome, but one raid in particular, there was a chap on a motorbike who...
Oh, yes.
Who got bombed. Can you tell us a bit about that story?
Yeah, well, he was what they call a Donna, that's a dispatch rider, and they had pardon me, motorbikes, and they took communications between the different companies and that. Anyway, this day there was a bombing raid was on, and he was riding up the road between where we were camped and the strip, and he hadn't heard the alarm goes. He was riding very along until they started to drop bombs, and he was such a fright. He parked the motorbike on the side of the road, and he ran up towards where we were camped, and he jumped in the first trench he came to, slit trench, but it happened to be our latrine. So he didn't get hurt. But anyway, after the raid was over, we could hear this voice calling out for help, help, help. So he went down, and here he was trying to climb out. He couldn't get out, it was about 12 foot deep. So we had to haul him out and wash him down before he went on his journey.
Also about this time on the 7 Mile during one of the bombing raids, you had a small campfire going.
Oh, yes.
Which you probably weren't supposed to have. No. And then a bomb landed close. Can you tell us a bit about that?
It did, yeah. Well, we had a guard post around the other side of the aerodrome from where we were camped. And there was a road came down there, and we had to sort of guard that. So we were sent around there, and our lieutenant said, there's no lighting fires, because, you know, if in case we did have an air raid. But anyway, we got there and there's a fire going. And of course, the thing was, at night time, the mozzie was so bad, you get some green leaves and put on the fire, and the smoke kept them away. So, which we did, which, you know, sounded right to us. Anyway, these Japanese bombers come up and they bombed Port Moresby. And when the alarm went, you naturally get into a slit trench, but being a guard post, there was nobody there permanently, and they hadn't dug trenches, only very shallow ones. So a couple of us got into this trench where we only kneeled down really, or crouched down, and a couple of the others got down on the side of the road. There was a bit of a camber there, you know, and so we got down in there. Anyway, this Japanese bomber came over and dropped a bomb, and we actually heard it pass overhead. It went, and then boom, it went off, only about 100 yards from where we were. Anyway, we got up and had a look round, and it had blown holes in our mosquito nets over our bunks. It also blew a tree off, which was about over a foot in diameter. And what surprised me, the splinters of the tree all went outwards, as if it had exploded from inside with a concussion, I suppose. But that was an experience. We were pretty close.
So you had a suspicion that the bomber was aiming for the fire, possibly?
Well, probably, yeah. There was no other reason, really. He could have seen the fire, yeah.
Can you remember when the Kitty Hawks arrived?
Oh, yes, I remember the Kitty Hawks. We've been promised these Kitty Hawks for ages and ages, and we called them the Tomorrow Hawks, so they never came. But anyway, when they did come, they came roaring up over the aerodrome, and we naturally thought they were Japanese Zeros and opened fire on them. And I believe there were a couple hit, but the pilots weren't too happy.
So you were at the 7 Mile drome, just protecting the drome. At that stage too, there wouldn't be much training being done as far as infantry training?
No, none at all, no. Oh, we'd go for a march perhaps inland, you know, away from the drome and that, but no training otherwise at all, no.
And you just lived in tents up as
Yeah,
part of D Company?
yeah, intense. Yeah, when they eventually arrived with all our gear, but but the first night we arrived, we didn't have any blankets or anything because they were all still in the Aquitania and they'd packed them at the bottom underneath all the other supplies. So we had to wait for a day or two for the sleeping gear to arrive. So we slept just out in the open on the grass, you know.
There would have been a lot of mosquitoes.
Oh, mosquitoes, yeah, yeah. We had no nets, we had nothing. So.
Who were some of your mates in D Company? Can you remember some of the names?
Oh, Roy Denning was a great mate, and Arthur Fenn. They were the two that I really made friends of, you know, they were good fellas.
Were they both from Gippsland, or you just made friends with them?
Roy Denning came from down Geelong way. I think Arthur Fenn came from Gippsland further down towards Warrigal, I think.
Colin, in D Company, 16 Platoon, your officer commanding the platoon was Lieutenant Hoffman, but he was a First World War veteran. Was he replaced?
Yeah, he was. Yeah. They decided to send him home, and we got a new lieutenant.
Which was Doug McLean?
Doug McLean,
yeah.
That's right, yeah.
What was Lieutenant Hoffman like?
Oh, nice, he was a gentleman, real nice fella, yeah, he was. He had a little drip on the end of his nose, and we called him Dewdrop. That was his nickname, but he was a real nice man.
And Doug McLean?
Yeah, he was a gentleman too, he was, yeah.
One of the sergeants in 16 Platoon was Reg Marsh from Terrelgan.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about Reg.
Reg was a good bloke. He wasn't actually, well, I mean, he was a sergeant, and they're never very popular, but he was a good one.
They used to look after you, did they?
Oh, yeah, good, yeah.
Now, about this time, after quite a considerable period of time on the 7 Mile, Sam Templeton, the commander of B Company, left by boat to go around to Buna with the heavy equipment and supplies drop at Buna. Because there was probably some suspicion that the Japanese were going to land on the north coast of New Guinea there. B Company was short of people, and they were going to be first over the track, and they asked volunteers. You volunteered for B Company. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, they called for volunteers, and I just thought it sounded good to, you know, sort of try something different, get away from the aerodrome and the bombing and all this sort of thing. Pardon me. So I transferred over to B Company, and then, of course, went with them when they started off up the Kokoda Track.
So B Company were the very first company to cross the Owen Stanleys and get to Kokoda, led by the famous Sam Templeton.
Sam Templeton, yeah.
Do you remember much about Sam Templeton?
No, only that he looked pretty old to me. You know, he was no youngster, but he was a nice chap and a good leader. Mm.
When you marched out of, well, obviously you got transport from Port Moresby up to near Owers Corner.
That's right, yeah.
And Owers Corner is the start of the Kokoda Trail. And you had your 21st birthday there.
That's right, yeah.
Did you have time to celebrate?
No, no, I didn't tell anybody. It wasn't, well, it was no good telling anybody. There was nothing special you could do. Get an extra tin of bully beef or a packet of hard biscuits or something, that's about all.
And at Owers Corner, you also got some native carriers to assist the company in the trip across
That's right.
the Owens family.
Yeah, well, the chaps that were there, what they call them, they're not rangers, but they, you know.
The Angao.
Angao, that's who I mean, yeah. Well, they took one look at us with their packs, and they said, you never made it. So they went up into the mountains to get some natives to come down and carry our gear for us, which was good.
Now, it's a grueling walk along the Kokoda Track from Owers to Kokoda. It probably would have taken you 8 to 10 days.
Mm.
Can you remember much about the actual walk itself?
Well, yes, you started off in the morning at the bottom of the mountain or whatever it was, and you'd walk till dinner time going up. And of course, there were no steps or anything then, you know, and it was sometimes it was slippery and wet, and other times it was okay. Then you always had lunch up the top of the peak, and then you'd spend the rest of the day going down. And that's the way it went for well over a week. But it was all right until it rained and made the track wet. You know, you slipped and slid about a bit, but it was pretty hard.
And the Japanese hadn't landed on the North Coast
No.
at that stage. So you were basically unaware of this and you're marching into the unknown.
Yeah.
How did you feel about that?
Oh, well, it's just what we didn't know, I suppose, really, because once we got to Kokoda, it's a beautiful place. Well, it was then, you know. When we got to Deneki and looked down over the valley, Kokoda was sitting down there, you know, the pawpaw trees and all this around, the little river ran through it. And it just looked nice. And it was a nice place, there's no doubt about that.
So B Company finally arrived at Kokoda village. Did you then set up at Kokoda a bit of a base camp?
Yeah, oh yes, yeah, we did, yeah. There was a house there that I think did belong to a plantation owner, a rubber tree plantation, and they made company headquarters in there, you know. But the rest of it, like, were in tents and that. Yeah.
Now, once you got to Kokoda, the Japanese had made the landing on the north coast around Buna, around about that time.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you knew the B Company had to now go to the Wairopi River and meet the Japanese. So you marched off from Kokoda to the Wairopi River. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, it was better than marching over the mountains. It was all flat, and it was a good track too, you know, wide track. And I just forget how many days. It probably took us 2 or 3 days to get there. But we usually stopped at a native village. There were plenty of villages along the way, you know. But I do remember we came to one village. I don't know whether about tropical ulcers. They were pretty bad. If you got a cut in your leg or something, and you know, perspiration got to form into an ulcer. We came to one village there one day, and there was a native village, and one of the men was sitting there, and he had a tropical ulcer on his ankle, and you actually see the bone through the, you know, through the ulcer. Anyway, our first aid chap filled the wound up with sulfamilamide and put a big plaster on it for him. So hopefully it cured it. That was always a problem, you know, tropical ulcers and that sort of thing.
You got to the Wairopi River and you basically dug in there. And the natives had given you advance warning the Japanese were coming.
Oh yes, yes.
So was the morale still fairly high? And
oh yeah. There were quite a few natives that had been in contact with the Japanese, and of course they couldn't contain them. They had to drop back as the Japanese advanced, but they sort of kept in touch. And then when we got to Wairopi, we set up we sent a patrol out to wait for them to come up, and we ambushed them. And then of course, what the Japanese did, as soon as they stopped, they try and outflank you and come in behind, cut you off. So we had to move back each time we did that.
So after the ambush at Wairopi River, and you held that for a certain period of time, did you then fall back back to Oivi?
Oh no, not that quickly. I would say it would take us 2 or 3 days to get back to Kokoda. And from there we went back to Oivi, yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about Oivi? Because Oivi was quite a substantial battle there.
Oh yeah. Wait a minute, you're right. We arrived at Oivi, and they'd flown a platoon in from Port Moresby and landed at Kokoda, and they came along and they brought a message for Sam Templeton that Oivi had to be held to the last man, so that they had time to bring more troops in by air. So that was what we were told then. We just formed a perimeter around Oivi and just waited for the Japs to arrive, which they did in a pretty quick time, you know.
You were pinned down by a lot of Japanese machine gun fire at Oivi.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, that was a bit scary. We were all laying down, facing outwards, you know, around the perimeter with their rifles, and these machine guns were firing, and the bullets were just going over the top of the heads. And the first time it's ever happened to me, and I didn't realise each time a bullet went over, it's like a little clap of thunder, a crack, you know, went over your head. But anyway, then we heard the Japs chopping trees down. We couldn't make out what it was all about. We didn't know what they were up to, but apparently they were actually Oivi's on a little plateau really. The ground drops away all around it, and the Japanese couldn't get the machine gun down low enough to fire on it, so they're building a platform so they could get the gun up and down and then fire down the top of it, which would have been the finish, you know.
That platform was destroyed by Lieutenant McLean.
Yeah.
And Charlie Pike.
Oh, was it? Yes, yes.
And McLean won the Military Cross, and
I forgot about that. Yeah.
They went down and threw grenades and destroyed the platform, I think. So that gave you enough time to try and retreat out of Oivi, and that was done at night. In like an Indian fog. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, 10 o'clock we were still laying down there, sort of half asleep, and you know, just trying to get a bit of sleep. And there was a touch on the shoulder, and somebody said, "We're trying to get out. We're going to try and get out." We wanted to form up on the edge of the perimeter and make a form up in line, and then we headed off down to the creek.
And you walked all along the creek to try and get out here upstream.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that. That must have been
that was pretty rough. Yeah.
Quite difficult.
Yeah. Well, what we did, we had a bayonet scabbard that hung down, the leather thing to put the bayonet in down the leg. When each man took the one in ahead of him, the chap ahead of him, so that we didn't lose contact. And then we tried to walk up the creek. It was, you know, you slip over and it was rocky, slippery. But anyway, we made it. We eventually got through the Japanese line and away back towards Kokoda.
Was it raining during the night too at this stage?
It did rain. Once pretty heavy, yeah.
So once you got out of Oivi, at dawn there was a lot of there was a lot of noise and shooting back at Oivi.
That's
so
right.
the Japanese must have attacked at that.
They did, yeah. We came up just on dawn. We come up out of the creek bed, and the track that wasn't that far away from us, that went back to Kokoda, so we come up onto that, and we hadn't been up there long. We heard all this shooting and sounded like hand grenades going off. We realised then that was when they were attacking Oivi, thinking we were still there, but luckily we weren't.
And Sam Templeton, Captain Templeton, who was the company commander, had left prior to this to go back along the track to meet up with a platoon coming back.
Another platoon that was coming.
And Sam was obviously never seen again.
That's right. Yeah.
Shot and taken prisoner.
Yeah.
And you didn't realise this until you got back.
No, we didn't know. No, because he headed off, and you know, that was the last we heard of him, of course.
So you arrived back at Kokoda, and there was a platoon there, and Colonel Owen had flown in too.
That's right.
The commanding officer.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a bit about what happened then? Because you had to then set up a perimeter on the.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we went back to Kokoda, and it's on a plateau. It's pretty steep around the sides, but the front, where we went up, it was fairly. It wasn't flat, but it was a slight rise up to the village. And so we dug in around the edge of the plateau, and then we just waited.
Waited for the Japanese to arrive.
Yeah.
And you said they attacked just on dusk one night, and there were 4 or 5 across. They came.
That's the one that came down from from Oivi. But of course, as soon as we opened fire, they scattered, and then they just tried to come up the front, and they couldn't. That's where our colonel was shot, Lieutenant Owen. He was shot in the head.
And you were around one corner of the escarpment there.
Mm.
So most of the fighting was probably on the other side, was it?
Well, it was more or less ahead of me, but to one, yeah. But where I was, the side was pretty steep. You know, I couldn't imagine anybody coming up there really, but we had to cover the whole perimeter. You know.
And at some stage during the battle, during the middle of the night, there was a decision to make your way back to Deniki.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
An officer came around and told you, did he?
Yeah. To make your own way back. We didn't go back as a group. Just make your own way back. Went back. There was a rubber tree plantation behind us. We went back through that.
And apparently, during that time going back through the rubber plantation, you were being mortared by the Japanese. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, that's right. There were mortar shells falling not far from us. And I realised that when they fire a mortar, it makes when it fires, it makes a popping noise when it comes out of the mortar barrel. And then I counted how many seconds it took before it hit the rubber tree that we were. So I was able to yell out when the time was up to duck, because the mortar was going to explode, you know. And actually we got out of that quite safely. Yeah.
Were there many of your B Company colleagues with you then, or just only a small bunch of you?
Only a small bunch, really, in our little group. Yeah, that's right. Because everybody went their own way. We didn't sort of form up into any sort of group at all, really. So we went up to Deniki.
And when you got to Deniki, Major Cameron, who was second in charge of the battalion, arrived then to take over the command.
That's right, yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, he was in Rabaul apparently, and of course they had to get out when Rabaul fell to the Japanese, and he came over and they made him colonel of the 39th. And of course he was full of zeal and wanted to sort of go back and take Kokoda, which they tried to do and it didn't work. No, it was unfortunate, really.
He sent a company back in.
Yeah.
At that stage, you were just at Deniki?
At Deniki, yeah.
With what was left of
B Company. Left of B Company, that's right, yeah.
Did you then move back to Ishiarava and make a stand at Ishiarava? Can you tell us a bit about, because the battalion would have been probably all together at that stage at Ishiarava.
Yeah, they were, yeah. Yeah, well, Ishiarava, we were not far from the main track, and up above us was jungle, and that's the way the Japanese came down when they arrived. It was a couple of days before they came and made up that distance to where we were.
But the battalion had basically formed into company areas, so the whole of the 39th was there, and you were waiting for the Japanese, and the Japanese were massing in quite large numbers at that stage.
They were, yeah.
You mentioned before that there was some mortaring, but the 39th had 3-inch mortars also, didn't they?
That's right. Yeah, there was one just up from where I was, where my position was. And with mortars, they fire in degrees to get the angle they want to send the mortar a certain distance. The bigger the degree, the further it goes. And I heard this chap that was operating the mortar. He was excited because they were firing on 0. So the mortar was going more or less straight up and down again, and the Japs were that close.
So about this time, the 2nd 14th Battalion had arrived, which was an AF battalion who had come back from the Middle East.
Yeah.
Can you tell us something about their arrival and what they said to you when they arrived?
Yeah. Well, they came along, and of course they had all the jungle greens on and steel helmets. We still had the khaki uniforms with slouch hats on, you know.
So the khaki uniforms weren't as dark as the jungle green, so you must have...
Oh, well, we stand out. Oh, yeah. Because the Japanese were all camouflaged, you know, they had all the jungle greens and all that sort of thing. We didn't. And when the 2nd 14th came up and saw us, they said, "You poor bastards."
Because you'd been...
Sorry for us.
You'd been fighting for a few weeks.
Oh, yeah. Well, we had, yeah. We just, you know, it was... we were glad to see them, of course. Wonderful.
And they took over basically the front line, the front perimeter.
Yeah, they did.
Of the major attack at Ishiarava.
Yeah.
You mentioned also that when the 39th started withdrawing from Ishiarava, you can remember looking down at the track and seeing the cooks leaving, but were ambushed by the Japanese.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, that's what happened in the army when you decide to retreat, to send the non-combatants away first, which are cooks and first aid people and all that sort of thing. Well, they'd taken off, but they didn't go back along the track because they didn't know just whether the Japanese might have cut it behind us. So they went down on the bottom side of the track and made their way through the jungle until they reckoned they were far enough away to be 300 or 400 yards, I suppose. And they came up on the track, and I could see them from where I was. And they just got up on the track and were about to go around a corner out of sight when the Japanese machine gun just above me opened fire, and I just saw them scatter all over the place, and that's where they hit the cook and he died.
So you withdrew from Ishirawat prior to the major battle that was met by the 2nd 14th and made your way to Naro, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Pardon me.
And could you hear the battle raging on behind you?
Oh, yeah. It went on for quite some time. Mm.
And then you got to Naro and did the battalion then regroup
Yeah,
for the march back?
that's right. Yeah.
How did you feel at that stage?
Well, yeah, we were getting pretty worn out, but it was good to have the 2nd 14th there. I mean, they really saved us for sure.
When you were coming back prior to going into hospital with malaria,
Oh, yeah.
The Salvation Army would have had quite a few posts along the track.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember much about the Salvos?
Oh, they were terrific. They were always up there, not far from where the action was, and they always had something. They had biscuits or drink or coffee or something. They did a really good job. Yeah. And it was great having them there, really, you know.
And they were right up near where the action was?
Oh, not far. Yeah, not far away. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they were good.
On the way back to Owa's Corner, the battalion stopped and reformed at Minari. The new battalion commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Lona, lined everybody up and gave a speech. The speech was filmed by Damien Para, and there's some famous photos in it. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, it was good. It was the first time we'd been formed up as a unit, you know, for a long time, since we've been up in the mountains. And it was good the way he spoke and congratulated us on what we'd done. And that's where Damien Para did the filming.
And can you remember much about Damien Para along the track? Or
oh, he was always up there. Yeah, not far away from the action. Yeah, he did a wonderful job. Really did. Yeah.
And suffering with malaria, and it's a fair walk back to Owa's Corner. It must have been a tough walk back across those river crossings.
Oh, yeah.
With the battalion.
Yeah. Well, most of the river crossings was just a log. You know, actually creeks, I suppose, pretty wide creeks, but you still had to balance yourself to get, get across. The logs had a flat top on them, you know, they went around, but most of the crossings were like that.
And you still would have been in your same uniform and boots that you had
originally
weeks ago, which would have been in very poor condition.
They were, yeah. Because we had the khaki gear from the desert. So that's how we stood out in the jungle, you know, and the old slouch hat. We didn't get the steel helmets until later on.
And of course, you didn't get a lot of food during the campaign, so you would have suffered not only from sickness, but from lack of food.
Yeah, well, we got enough to keep us going. You know, it was all mainly cold, you know, biscuits and bully beef in cans and that sort of thing. Well, we generally got a cup of tea or coffee or something like that. But there was no cooked food while we were in action and that sort of thing, no.
On the walk back to Owa's, did you have a stick cut to?
Yeah, but everybody, I think, because by that time the track was pretty worn with so many people going over it, and it was wet and slippery. You know, you'd take one step forward and then two back, sort of thing. But it was pretty tough going.
Did you see a lot of the native carriers with bringing the wounded back also?
Oh yeah, they're terrific, wonderful. Yeah, they did a good job. Before there was stretcher, one each corner. It was just small saplings, you know, that strung together and put the canvas cover on them. But they did a wonderful job. They saved a lot of lives, the natives did, for sure.
On the walk back after Minari, back to Owa's, you would have passed a lot of fresh troops coming up.
Yeah.
To battle. Did you give them any advice, or
you'll be sorry? That was the thing in those days. You'll be sorry. No, not really. No. We've sort of given them, you know, a bit of heart that, you know, that it wasn't all bad. Yeah.
And they were keen to get to the front.
Oh yeah.
Now from Naro, you then went back to Aurora Creek, and then the march all the way back. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, actually, I had malaria up there, and I was given a certificate or a voucher sort of thing from the first aid fellow to see a doctor. Well, we didn't have a doctor, so we only sort of made our own way back. There was nothing organised really about it, It was just every man for himself, more or less, Until I got back and I reported to the hospital. There was a chap sitting outside the hospital with a chair and a table, and I gave him this thing I had about having malaria. And I think I said, I'll be okay now. I can go back with the unit. And he said, oh no, we better check you out. So I went to hospital.
And the rest of the battalion went back to Koitaki?
Yeah.
How long did you spend in hospital?
Oh, I forget now. It was weeks. And then I got over the malaria, and I had a pain in the side, and they were going to operate for appendicitis. Anyway, one of the doctors came in. He was a major, and he examined me the night before. He said, "You haven't got appendicitis." So they did further tests and found it was kidney trouble, a stone in the kidney. So they decided to send me back to Australia, back to an Australian hospital.
Colin, after your time in hospital in Port Moresby, you were on the Taruna, the hospital ship, back to Australia, and you went into hospital at Salim, near Charters Towers, for about a month. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, that was good. There was a military hospital there, and really well looked after. Plenty of food. It was quite a change from where I'd come from. Yeah, it was good. And I was there, I'm not just sure how long, it was over a month. Until I came good. I had renal colic, which was more or less a kidney complaint. Anyway, they got that cleared up, and I went home on leave then, from there, for a month.
You went back to Caranbara?
Back to Caranbara, yeah.
And what did the locals think, and your parents and your family think about it?
Yeah, they were pleased. I didn't tell you, but I was married on my final leave before I went up to New Guinea, to Edna, my girlfriend and my wife. Of course, she was happy to see me home too.
She'd been away for quite a long time.
Oh yeah.
So after that month off, you went back up to the Athen Tablelands?
Yeah, that's right.
Rejoined the 39th.
Yeah, they'd come back in the meantime, and they were camped up there, in camp. But when I got up there, most of them had gone home on leave, and they asked me like to wait because I'd already been home, because I'd had sick leave and I still had the ordinary leave to come. But anyway, they got a request. There was a signal school, High Maroochydore, that's communication, like telephone and radio, and they had to send somebody down, so they sent me down there. So that was good. I learned a fair bit about phones and radio contact and that sort of thing. And then when that was over, I went back, and then I had another month at home on my annual leave sort of thing. Yeah.
Back at Caranbara.
Yeah.
Then after that, then you returned back up to Wandekla.
Yeah.
Then they announced that the 39th was disbanding.
That's right.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, it was bad news in a way, but as it turned out, I think it was a good thing in the long run, because we were that depleted. They would have had to reform the whole battalion, and we went in with the second, and they were just back from the Middle East, and we sort of reinforced them.
Because the second were also based up on the Athen Table.
Yeah.
So a large number of troops from the 39th joined the second.
They did. Yeah, quite a lot. Yeah.
So you go with some of your mates?
Oh yeah.
The company?
Yeah. Yeah, most of them went over to the second. Yeah.
And the second was a New South Wales battalion.
It was.
How did they take a lot of Victorians?
Oh, well, it's the old story about the Yarra is the only river in the world that runs upside down with the mud on the top, all this sort of thing, But oh no, we got on well with them, really. Yeah. Now, most of them good friends in the second, and the mates I had with the 39th, Roy Denny and Arthur Fenn, they went over to the second, so that was good.
And Major Cameron, who had been the second in command when Colonel Owen was killed.
That's right, yeah.
He was the second's commanding officer.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, yeah, that's right.
And in the second, you were lucky enough to be selected into the intelligence section. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, the intelligence section is not as, you know, it sounds like you've got to be pretty clever, but what they do, they look after the maps, and they're with the captain if you're out on an exercise or whatever, and he wants to know exactly where you are. You have to show him on the map exactly where you are, and give him a compass bearing if he wants one. If he wants to a direct fire onto a certain spot, you've got to tell him, you know, the degrees of fire and that sort of thing. Oh, it's interesting, very interesting. It was good. I enjoyed that.
So you would have been heavily involved at battalion headquarters.
Yeah, that's right.
At certain times. So you would have seen Lieutenant Colonel Cameron in action.
Oh yeah.
What was he like?
He was all right. I wouldn't say he was very popular, but he did a good job. Yeah.
The second battalion then embarked back to up to New Guinea, and they were in the VX144785.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, that was a different story again. The Americans had been at VX, and they'd bypassed ITV. So our job was, and we're Japanese stood up in the mountains, the Torres Valleys above VX, and our job was to sort of cut their line of communication and isolate them completely. So that was our job, and we started off from ITV to go down towards VX and then up into the mountains, and what riled a lot of the troops there, every time they mentioned the VX, was just mopping up, you know, mopping up, and it didn't sound very exciting. Anyway, one day we'd been up there in the mountains, and a couple of the chaps that had their hands burnt with grenades and that were coming down, and the reporters down on the coast said, "What happened, mate? What happened to your hands?" He said, "Oh, we've got a few splinters out of the mop." We're mopping up with.
The action, or being with the second and having the uniforms and all the equipment and the support would have been a lot different.
Oh, absolutely.
When you were up on the track.
Oh, yeah, it was. Yeah, it was really good. Yeah. Just, you know, it was everything we needed. See, up there we had the old Lewis guns, you know, up in New Guinea, we had the Bren guns there, and submachine guns, the old submachine guns, and all those there, which we didn't have up in the first place. Yeah.
And did you get a promotion to the rank of corporal while you?
Oh, yes.
While you're in the second?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Just before the war, well, just before I came home, as a matter of fact. So I wasn't a corporal very long, but long enough to get all the back pay and that was coming to me at the higher rate, and that was all right. Yeah.
So did you then come back with the battalion at the end of that campaign, back to Melbourne or back to Sydney?
No, we stayed up in the Atherton Tablelands, and then when I got discharged, I came down. I came through Royal Park, and that was on Christmas Eve, in '45, and they raced me through so I could be home in time for Christmas.
And that was back to Korumburra?
That was back to Korumburra, yeah, back where we all started from.
Of course, you wouldn't have seen much of your wife.
No, home leaves, and our first child was born in April '45. She was about 9 months old before I saw her. She was that little darling, she was. Yeah.
Well, it would have been good for the war to be over then.
Oh, yeah.
Because you'd been in the army for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It was good. Good to be home back the old routine. Then I didn't stay in Korumburra for very long. For a couple of years, and then I moved over here to Trelton. I got a job at the APM.
And you stayed with the APM for 30 years?
30 years, that's right, yeah.
Well, Colin, on behalf of the 39th Battalion Association Historical Subcommittee, we'd like to thank you for your time and this very interesting interview. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.